nation's power.
The field of anti-Trump presidential campaign buffoonery is upon us, as a field of 18 hubris-riddled lecturers of hypocrisy currently take the national stage to whine about half-baked propaganda cooked to a burnt crisp by their cohorts in the mainstream media.
Yes, holy crap!
I learned right here on these streets that you can't make progress by dividing people. You can't make progress by stoking fear or setting us one against the other.
And that's why I'm here today. To tell a different story than Make America Great Again. Because there's a myth being sold to industrial and rural communities. The myth that we can stop the clock and turn it back. It comes from people who think the only way to speak to communities like ours is through resentment and nostalgia. They're selling an impossible promise of returning to a bygone era that was never as great as advertised to begin with.
What is democratic socialism? Fair question? Okay. So let's talk about it.
What's the punishment for people who don't hand in their guns? Do they go to jail?
Well, Jake, they would, but I also offer an alternative, which would be to keep them at a hunting club or a shooting range.
Their speeches, aside from the whimpering lies and politically correct pandering, fall short of what Americans historically expect on the campaign trail. For example, Bull Moose Teddy Roosevelt, who had once given a 90-minute speech after being shot in the chest at close range, said this about America's immigration quandary. We should insist, if the immigrant who comes here in good faith becomes an American and assimilates himself to us, he shall be treated on an exact equality with everyone else. For it is an outrage to discriminate against any such man because of creed or birthplace or origin. But this is predicated upon the person's becoming in every facet an American and nothing but an American. There can be no divided allegiance here. Any man who says he is an American but something else also isn't an American at all. We have room for but one flag, the American flag. We have room for but one language here, and that is the English language. And we have room for but one sole loyalty, and that is a loyalty to the American people. Theodore Roosevelt. Teddy Roosevelt would be appalled at the foreign interests and meddling, and at the handful of money changers actually supporting this lackluster buffet of windbags.
Now, Lesterland looks a lot like the United States. Like the United States, it has about 311 million people, and of that 311 million people, it turns out 144,000 are called Lester. So 144,000 are called Lester, which means about 0.05% is named Lester. Now, Lesters in Lesterland have this extraordinary power. There are two elections every election cycle in Lesterland. One is called the general election. The other is called the Lester election. And in the general election, it's the citizens who get to vote, but in the Lester election, it's the Lesters who get to vote. And here's the trick. In order to run in the general election, you must do extremely well in the Lester election. You don't necessarily have to win, but you must do extremely well. Now, what can we say about democracy in Lesterland? Well, we can say, number one, as the Supreme Court said in Citizens United, the people have the ultimate influence over elected officials. Because after all, there is a general election. But only after the Lesters have had their way with the candidates who wish to run in the general election. And number two, obviously, this dependence upon the Lesters is going to produce a subtle, understated, we could say camouflaged bending to keep the Lesters happy. Okay, so we have a democracy, no doubt, but it's dependent upon the Lesters and dependent upon the people. It has a competing dependencies, we could say conflicting dependencies, depending upon who the Lesters are.
President Trump rose above the competition in 2016 because he spoke directly to the people. The Democrats have tied themselves to a message of socialism, U.S. constitutional loathing, and division. Foolishly, the Democrats assume 325 million plus Americans are willing to swallow their rhetoric, ultimately blaming average Americans, as the Democrats lead America down a path of certain doom. John Bound reporting.